In the segment of Parshat Re'eh here that I just chanted, I focused on the command for the observance of Pesach. And during this, this is a listing, I'm reading an excerpt from our festival calendar that we find here in Parshat Re'eh. And as I read this, I focused on some words in particular that remind us of the obligation to remove, or not only to not to eat matzah, but to remove all unleavened products, all traces of leaven from our home. Now, the beginning of Pesach may seem like an eternity ago by now, as the days we are stuck at home continue to blend together. But it was just over a week ago that many of us were going through the final touches of our multi-staged annual Operation Clean Sweep. We finished eating our last chametz meals in advance of the holiday. The night before Pesach, we staged a traditional candlelight scavenger hunt with a wooden spoon and a feather for the last symbolic pieces of chametz in our homes. Then on Wednesday morning, we got rid of our chametz that had too much value to end up in the trash by selling it through the shul or through another agent. And then we either trashed or burned whatever scraps we had left. When we did B'dikat Chametz, when we did the search for chametz on that Tuesday evening last week, the candlelight checking for or search for chametz, as well as when we threw away or burned the last chametz, we recited a short passage in Aramaic. We said, Kol chamira v'chamia de'ika birshuti, de'chazite u'delo chazite, de'chamite u'delo chamite, de'viyarte u'delo biyarte, libatel v'leheve hefker ke'afra da'ara. Now, I'm not expecting everyone to be an Aramaic scholar here, since it's a language we don't use all that often these days, so let me translate for you. All chametz in my possession, whether I have seen it or not, whether I have found it or not, whether I have removed it or not, let it be nullified and be ownerless as the dust of the earth. What are we saying in this declaration? We seem to be saying that we have tried our very best to account for all the chametz in our house and to either sell it to another person for the duration of the holiday or remove it by trashing or burning it. But we may not have seen every last crumb of chametz in the corner or found every last crumb in between the cushions of the couch. And yet we're asking for even those leftovers to be considered as if we had found them, gathered them, and removed them from our home, and thus allowing us to fulfill the mitzvah, the obligation of being chametz-free, as was talked about in our Torah reading, in our home for Pesach. If you think it's a bit of an unusual formulation, well, it is. Can you think of other significant obligations in Judaism to which we attach a similar formula or declaration that basically cover our bases in case we didn't 100% complete the obligation or do it 100% correctly? We don't say anything for Torah scrolls or tefillin or mezuzot that stipulates I try to avoid any errors in fulfilling these obligations, but in case I screwed up, please count it as if I did it right. We don't do it when we build a sukkah or acquire a lulav and etrog. We don't do it for keeping kosher in general and offer up some kind of disclaimer in case we end up eating something non-kosher or perhaps accidentally mixing up our meat and dairy dishes or anything like that. And I could go on with numerous additional examples, but I don't have to. Because the chametz removal declaration is the only time that I'm aware of where fulfilling a commandment comes together in a package with an apology, in a sense, and a plea for acceptance in case we fall short in its fulfillment. So why might this be the case? My educated guess is that it has something to do with how hard it is to fulfill the mitzvah of ridding your house, your cars, and your office of every single speck of chametz. I mean, we try our best, but could we really check in every page of every book we read during the past year just to make sure we didn't forget about a cracker or a cookie crumb from back when we were curling up with that book? Do we even always remember to thoroughly clean and vacuum our cars in the event that we or one of our passengers left a small candy wrapper with a tiny piece of an M&M shell in it? Or go through all of our office drawers where we might have stashed a snack for when we missed lunch during a busy day? It's not so easy to catch every last piece of chametz amongst our stuff, even if we take the obligation to rid ourselves of chametz very seriously. So we do everything we can, and then we say to God in so many words, I tried my best, and I hope it was enough. I have to say, friends, as we continue to dwell under this COVID-19 cloud, This idea of trying our best and hoping it was enough feels particularly compelling. For weeks, we've been streaming daily Shabbat and Yom Tov, daily services, Shabbat services, Yom Tov services from Beck Family Sanctuary, from here in the Fonberg Chapel, and from our homes. We've incorporated the saying of Mourner's Kaddish into our services, even though we don't have a physical in-person minyan assembled in one room, and we've recently shifted these morning services to Facebook live streaming so we can be in here, in this more intimate space where no one else is physically present, to feel closer to you who are watching at home and celebrating these sacred times with us. None of these are ideal circumstances, but we're doing the best we can to balance halakha, Jewish law, concerns, and our community's current needs. We hope our community and God will feel it was enough. Similarly, in light of the challenges of obtaining certain food products or even getting out of the house associated with the coronavirus crisis, leading up to Pesach, the Committee of Jewish Law and Standards, the CJLS of the Rabbinical Assembly, came out with a number of lenient recommendations for kosher Pesach status for certain types of items. Some items that normally would require a kosher for Pesach hechsher, if purchased before Pesach, were permitted to just have a standard year-round hechsher, and the same was the case for certain items bought in the intermediate days of Pesach that normally would have required kosher Pesach certification. Why? Because it's the best many of us can do under the circumstances. Permission was also granted for virtual Seder gatherings of various iterations. Was a Zoom or Facebook Live Seder an ideal situation? Of course not. Not according to Jewish law, any more than it was for families and friends who annually deeply treasure the opportunity to gather together for Sedarim, to celebrate in groups, large and small. But we all did the best we could to celebrate a meaningful Pesach. And what of members of our community and of so many other communities who have been separated from ailing loved ones, or been unable to see their loved ones before they died, or mourners who have not been able to come to a bricks and mortar minyan to recite the Kaddish for a loved one? They call or FaceTime or text their loved ones frequently. They make their presence and love felt in whatever way they can or could. And they join in for a virtual minyan on Zoom or watch on Facebook Live and say the Kaddish. Every one of them is doing the best he or she could. The other day, I was speaking with our congregants Roz and Gary Deckelboim when they called to tell me that Roz's father, Isaac Nathan, of blessed memory, had died of coronavirus Tuesday in a hospital in New Jersey. She hasn't seen him since February because her March trip and anticipated April trip were canceled on account of the pandemic. And they told me the story and gave me permission to share it with you of how they pleaded and negotiated with the ICU staff to have them keep his body there for an extra hour and a half or 2 hours until someone from the funeral home could drive over to the funeral home, get a set of tachrichim, of Jewish burial shrouds, and then drive the shrouds back to the hospital so that Isaac could be dressed in the shrouds by the kind-hearted ICU nurse before he was put in the body bag in advance of burial. They even had to set up a call between the nurse and another staff member at the funeral home who was able to walk her through how to put the shrouds on. You see, Isaac was a survivor of the Shoah, was a survivor of the Holocaust, and Roz couldn't bear the thought of her father being buried naked as so many victims of the Shoah were. So she and Gary and the nurse and the funeral home staff members did whatever it took to give proper kavod, honor, to Roz's father in death under these awful COVID-19 circumstances. As Roz told me in her very own words, she did the best she could. She wasn't allowed to visit in the last month, and she wasn't allowed to be there to say goodbye in person, and the cemetery may not even let her shovel earth to cover him tomorrow at the funeral. But her actions the other night, with Gary's help, were a powerful and emotional demonstration of love, devotion, and honor for her father. Roz, you absolutely did the best you could. and it was and will be enough. In a few moments, we'll be reciting Yizkor, and we'll set aside some precious time, not only to honor the memories of our loved ones, but also in a way to commune with their memories. When we reflect on our dearly departed, no doubt many things go through our minds, including both joy for the times we shared and sorrow for those times having come to an end, as well as possibly some mixed emotions like feelings of guilt or remorse. Did we do all we could to honor our parents or our other loved ones or friends? Did we tell them often enough that we loved them and cared about them? Did we listen to their advice as much as we should have? Did we thank them as much as we should have and as much as they deserved for the lessons they taught us and the things they did for us? Did we always live the way they wanted or expected us to live? I'm willing to bet that in our own way, each of us may ask ourselves some of these questions. It's natural and human to feel some measure of guilt in our lives, but eventually there has to be some limit to the amount of guilt we can carry with us or the length of time we can carry it before it impedes our ability to live and function. So today I'll suggest we learn a lesson from the unusual chametz declaration I spoke about at the beginning of my remarks. As we begin our Yizkor service, let's say to ourselves, I did my best to honor and love and care for you. I really did. Yes, I made mistakes, but based on what I knew and who I was at the time, I always tried my best in the moment. So please, dear loved ones who have departed this world, I ask, let whatever I did wrong, whatever I did that may have hurt you or disappointed you, be hefker ke'afra de'ara. Let it be as if it no longer was. Let the mitzvah of kibud av v'em, honoring parents, or my responsibilities as a parent, a spouse, a grandparent, a grandchild, a sibling, a niece, a nephew, or a friend, be as if I had performed them correctly, because I did them to the best of my ability. I did the best I could as your loved one. I'm not perfect, but I'm asking for it to have been enough. We began Pesach with our chametz declaration, so let's end Pesach with our loved one declaration. Just as we ask God to accept our best efforts to rid our house of chametz, so now do we ask our loved ones in Olam Haba, the world to come, to accept our best efforts that we made during their lifetimes. We ask their souls to continue to love us unconditionally now, just as they did when they used to stand next to us and take us into their warm embrace. We did our best, and it was enough. We do our best, and it will continue to be enough. Amen. I'm going to invite everyone to rise now for the Yizkor service beginning on page 330 in our Sidur Lev Shalem.